Sale from the Community Technical Assistance Center. We will begin in about 1 minute. We're waiting for a few others to just join us. Thanks so much for being here. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Dina Sale. I'm with the Community Technical Assistance Center. Happy Monday, and thank you for joining us with our Engagement Best Practices in Adult Outpatient Mental Health Services webinar. I am joined with Jason Jones, Ruth Cologne-Wagner, and Yvette Kelly. We're going to go ahead and get started. Some other people may join in, and we'll just welcome them as they come in. This is our agenda today. We want to see where you all are, so we're going to welcome you. We're going to do a little introduction. But before that, Yvette's going to do a review of the supervision webinar. This is part of a series, and so the first part of the series was about supervision and the importance of supervision as it pertains to the use of engagement practices, and those engagement skills are just so important to the moment our participants come into the door. We're going to talk about language. Ruth Cologne-Wagner works with NIAPRIS. She's our partner from there, and she's going to speak to you about the importance of language. We're going to talk about the definition of engagement, and then we're going to go into barriers, concrete and perceptual barriers, but we're also going to talk a minute about trauma history as a barrier. And then we're going to get into the engagement process. Today we're going to cover the initial contact. And then Ruth and Jason are going to participate in a role play, and you all can give us some feedback. I just want to direct your attention to the right side of our webinar, where you can chat in any questions along the way or concerns that you may have, and we will try to answer those as soon as possible. Thanks so much for being here. We're going to go ahead and get started. So my name is Dina Sale, and I work with the Community Technical Assistance Center and have for many years, well, as soon as we were in the inception about 3 years ago as a Children's Technical Assistance Center, and we've grown ever since to work with adult outpatient mental health clinics as well. I'm a social worker. I have been for about 15 years, and I've been working with Dr. Mary McKay, who was really the expert in engagement practices for many, many years. So I'm going to let my team introduce themselves. Ruth, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Kara. My name is Ruth Cologne-Wagner. I've had the pleasure of meeting all of you during our in-person learning sessions. I work with NIAPRIS, and my title is Senior Projects Coordinator. And I also am a social worker, and I've been director of a PROS program and a CDTN for a handful of children's services. It's a pleasure to be with you all today.
Hello, yes. This is Yvette. Thank you, Ruth. This is Yvette Kelly, and I am with the Community Technical Assistance Center at McSilver. I've recently joined the team. I'm a licensed mental health counselor and have worked in the field for a number of years, specifically in children's mental health, and so had the opportunity to oversee and provide supervision to a number of staff.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Jason Jones. I'm a social worker, and I recently joined the Community Technical Assistance Center of New York just a few months ago. And I'm really excited to be working on this project with all of you. So I hope that you take something away from this webinar.
Great, thank you everyone. So there's a poll that popped up. We just want to know where you're from. Are you, what role do you have in engaging participants in care? Are you a director, an administrator? Are you a supervisor? Are you a clinician? Or are you, do you provide administrative support? So please choose A, B, C, or D in the poll to the right, just so we get a sense of who's on the line with us today. Okay, the results are going to come up here. So waiting for the results just to get a sense. So we have a few directors, administrators, a few supervisors, mostly clinicians on the line with us, and a few administrative support staff. Thanks so much. It's really great to know who is with us. Since we can't see you all, at least we know your role. So we're going to just do a recap of the last webinars. The last webinar around supervision and the supervisory relationship. And as a reminder, this webinar has been recorded and posted on our ctacny.com website, so you can access it at any time. Yvette's going to give a brief summary, and then we'll keep going with the rest of our content today.
Thank you, Kara. So yes, as Kara mentioned, that we have done a previous webinar around supervision, and if you think about how supervision relates to the enhancement of skills, we find that supervision is really a key element in assisting clinicians in enhancing their skills, especially as it relates to engagement. And so when we think about the quality of the relationship and supervision, and the purpose of supervision, we really want to kind of point out that the purpose is really to work with clinical staff to address the emotional experience of this human service work. We know that doing this work is really, really hard. We work with pretty difficult clients, and so trying to really kind of assist a new therapist in processing all of the work that they're doing with participants. Again, in improving the quality of interventions and staff decision-making. So good supervision helps clinicians kind of walk through those kind of difficult and tough decisions and really be able to do that independently as time goes on. Enabling the organizational accountability and effective line management. So really, again, from an organizational standpoint, being held accountable to the work that is being done. Identifying and addressing the issues related to cases and caseloads and workload management. We all know that it's pretty tense and difficult, and there's a lot of work to be done. And so good supervision helps therapists kind of process that and kind of manage that so that the necessary tasks are prioritized and are able to be accomplished. And encouraging the identification and achievement of personal learning, career and development opportunities. So, supervision is a time, again, to assist therapists in enhancing their skills, but also taking a look at, what would they like to improve upon in the future? Where would they like to go? What is their own career goals? And so great supervision allows the opportunity to kind of do all of those things, pull all of those things together. When we talk about what constitutes good coaching and supervision, it's the recognition of the essential elements of an effective supervisory alliance. So a high level of trust, collaborative style, so working with the supervisee and what they would like to see, what they would like to work on, emphasis on self-efficacy, and I want to kind of say self-assessment as well, and a direct communication style, being really clear with clinical staff in terms of what is expected of them, what is required, and how they're going to be assessed. A commitment to providing a sufficient dose of supervision. I know this is tricky for supervisors at times because things come up. There's multiple demands made on our time, but in order to ensure that we are, working with our staff to provide the best care possible, we need to make sure that we are committed to providing a sufficient dose of supervision. So whatever we're committed to, whether that's weekly, bi-weekly, we need to try to stick to that. We also need to develop a process for direct observation of the work being delivered. And so this is more than just therapist self-report. This is really observing kind of what is happening in sessions, either through live observation or through audio and video review. And that's really an important element. So being able to work with the therapist as they're kind of in session with clients. Behaviorally specific written feedback from direct observation activities. So if you provide the live observation, you want to give them feedback on the things that you thought they did well, the things, areas in which you think they could improve upon. You want to kind of have that written out so there's some mutual agreement around those. Additional modeling of the skills and strategies to employ. So when working with therapists, you as a supervisor are modeling some of the things that you want to see them doing with their participants. And providing ongoing opportunities for practice and feedback. So taking that learning and utilizing that learning in session and then being able to report back on kind of how did it go, did that intervention work or not, what could we change to get a different outcome. And so plan for incorporating this feedback, like I said, and continued direct observation into practice. So the coaching and mentoring process begins before the intervention or service is provided. So it really starts day one when you're working with a therapist. You want to be able to work with them to help them craft the work that is going to be done with their particular clients or participants, excuse me. You want to discuss the service plan and the supervisor's concerns and strategies around working with a particular individual. How are they going to approach the work? If there's a particular issue or diagnosis or, that they're working on, what is their approach to that work? You want to provide helpful tips based on engagement best practices, which is what we're going to be talking about today. And for practices with fidelity, you want to review the fidelity indicators and identify which indicators will be the focus of the work. And for direct observation, you want to discuss how and why the supervisor will be introduced into the work. You always want to provide the opportunity for supervisees to reflect on their own work. So from their perspective, what do they think went well, or what do they think are areas of improvement? You want to focus and emphasize on, again, the strengths, what they did well in the session. Share your feedback in a very timely and direct way. That allows for conversation around kind of the feedback that you're giving them. Doesn't necessarily mean you are the final expert, but it's really a collaborative process. And you want to offer concrete and practical suggestions that can be applied at the next available opportunity. And lastly, I think the outcome of great supervision is that it's actually helpful to the supervisee. So you want to get feedback from supervisees about the helpfulness of the coaching.
Thank you, Yvette. That's really helpful. I hope you all do get a chance to review that webinar of Dr. Salerno's if you haven't already. I think the biggest takeaway is that all of our work around engagement and enhancing engagement practices is really about creating a culture of feedback. And so that feedback starts with the supervisor and clinicians, and it's also really important, we'll talk more about this in our second webinar around engagement practices on February 23rd, but also creating a culture of feedback around the clinician and the participant. But let's focus on today's webinar. So the purpose of this webinar is we want to provide all of you with us today on the line the opportunity to improve the knowledge and skills of engagement practices that meet high standards of quality. So we're going to bring to you a lot of practices throughout today and February 23rd, but today we're really focusing on the first contact. The importance of participant engagement, I think everyone on the line knows this, otherwise you wouldn't be here, but we're aware of the changes happening around managed care, and I want to put a plug in for our Managed Care Technical Assistance Center as well, mctac.org, if you need any assistance around managed care technical assistance. There's a great group working on this here with us that are happy to help you in any way. But as we know, with these changes, there's a focus on outcomes. And we believe, and our research has shown us, that these outcomes can be affected by day one. So if there's strong relationship, if there's strong alliance, between participant and clinician, that outcomes are likely to follow in that direction. So successful participant engagement practices contribute to the participant recovery, increased rates of attendance, and increased rates of follow-up appointments. So not only those initial appointments, but also the continued engagement. And again, supervisors are really crucial in promoting the engagement practices. So that's why we've included you in this process. I'm going to let Ruth talk a little bit about language, the power of words, and then we'll continue our time together. Thanks, Ruth.
You're welcome. Thank you. You will find that throughout our time together, we're referring to the people that we work with as participants. This is crucial because we all know that there is power in words and even more power in labels. We believe in coming from a strength-based approach, and we refrain from using such labels as patient, client, consumer, etc. When I was a director of a PROS program, we were transitioning from a continuing day treatment program, and in that program, old model, old program, we had then called people consumers, and we knew that that was old language, and we knew it was not recovery-based. So we struggled with what to call people that we work with, and I decided that it was important to ask them directly because I had heard from other PROS programs around New York State that they would refer to these individuals as students because PROS is a much more academic model. But there was just something about that that didn't sit well with me, so I decided to go directly to the source. We had a population of 250 people, and we asked each and every one of them what they felt, what they would like to be called. And we gave them many options of which to choose from, and they chose member. And I absolutely love this. We empowered them to choose the word that they would be most comfortable with, and they chose that word member. They took control of the label, and it was non-stigmatizing. And now, of course, I'm no longer there, and I think back, had I had my way, I would have loved to just call them people. Maybe we can still do that. So language is very, very powerful. The people at NIAPRS know it, and CTAC and MCTAC know that as well. Language can provide hope, empowerment, and optimism. It's becoming increasingly well recognized that we can use power as a tool to guide people towards their recovery. Yet some language use may not always be conducive to recovery. We suggest using language without labels, judgments, or jargon. In other words, use real everyday language. So, for example, would you use non-compliant with medication when speaking about a family member? Or would you just say, Mom hasn't been taking her medication? That's a factual statement without any value judgment attached to it. So it's real everyday language. That will help people feel heard, understood, and it absolutely will reduce stigma. We hope that you can do that. So today we present to all of you when speaking with people that you work with, and when in treatment team meetings, when there are no people that you work with around, try to use everyday language. Language reflects and shapes our thinking and our behavior. The right use of language can show empathy and understanding while promoting hope and recovery all at the same time. By using the right language, all of us, all the time, it's not easy. We've even had many snafus here at CTAC, but we're working on it. We're all working on it. And let's work on being intentional and considered in our language. And that takes time, and we understand that. Let's choose our words carefully and think about how words can impact an individual in recovery. Next slide, please. Oh, the power of peers. A peer specialist, for those of you who may not know, is a person with a lived recovery experience who has been trained and certified to help his or her peers gain hope and achieve specific life and recovery goals. Actively engage in his or her own recovery, the peer specialist shares real-world knowledge and experiences, something that you and I, without that shared experience, cannot do, no matter how well we are intended. And they use this knowledge and experience to teach others to build a better life. This person can be a volunteer or a paid employee. They go by different names in different settings, different titles in different settings, but they share a common commitment to assisting their peers from a strengths-based approach and a solution-focused perspective. So peers draw on a shared understanding of recovery. They focus on what will sustain recovery, things like employment, reconnection with family, achievements, purposeful activities, as well as being included in communities. Peer support, instills hope by being with someone who has been there and through it. And it's not about fixing things, but by building on strengths. So we ask that as you move forward and you consider the positive addition peer support can have on your program and the people that you work with, recovery offers healing and the context of supportive relationships, and peers excel at building effective relationships. So I hope you can consider adding peers to your workforce.
Thank you, Ruth. And we've brought Ruth today, and she's been with us. We've been working on this engagement work around adult outpatient mental health clinics for about 2 years, and we had NIAPRS join us at the table for many months around creating language in brochures and handouts, and we were very thoughtful about it. So we want you to know that we worked hard at this and that we really respect and admire the work that NIAPRS does, but really hold on high importance the use of language and how important it is. And so you'll hear us refer to clients as participants throughout our time together. And also that using peers in your organizations is a real engagement strategy. And so if you have any questions or interest around that, Ruth's information is at the end of the presentation, and you can contact her with any questions or interest around that. So we're going to move forward around best practices of engagement, again focusing on engagement and what it is and why it's important, and then talking about the first contact with you. Yvette's going to go through this with you.
Thank you, Kara. So let's spend a few minutes talking about engagement and why this concept of engagement is so important. When we talk about engagement, we like to go with the definition that engagement is about motivating and empowering participants to recognize their own needs, strengths, and resources, and to take an active role in changing their life. And so with that, our belief is that all participants have the ability to really take an active role in their treatment and to really consider what their needs are and to utilize their strengths to be able to overcome the adversities in their life. And so, engagement is one of the essential elements in the provider-participant relationship from the moment a participant is considered for treatment until they terminate or discharge. So as a provider, you need to know it's not, you don't get engagement with a client on a one-time basis, that you have to continually work at this every time you are meeting with a participant. And so that's very important. And so when we talk about, how do we engage participants, how do we work with them, we're going to talk about several elements of engagement that are helpful when trying to work with families and individuals. And so I'm going to start. Can you hit the next slide for me, Kara? Thank you. So we're going to talk about the elements of engagement and how each of these are very important to engaging participants in the treatment process. And we start with engagement starts with aligning with the participant early on by getting a true understanding of their concerns as they see it. So not as we see the concerns, but as they see their concerns. And to gain an understanding of how the events in their life have led them to where they are currently. We also want to be really diligent about identifying barriers that might hinder a participant from being able to engage in a relationship with you as the provider and ultimately meeting their goals. So, all of the best practice, interventions are great, but they don't work if you don't have a participant in your office to take advantage of that. So, again, this is something that you have to work at continuously. And so, again, identify, try to be proactive in identifying what may come up that may hinder you from being able to take advantage of treatment, and then really work to kind of mitigate that before it becomes a true barrier. You have to understand this is a shared process, and this includes shared power, so they have the ability to kind of voice what their needs are. And for us to really, as providers, to really consider that and make that instrumental in the treatment interventions. We also want to understand that participants are resilient and come with a number of strengths, and these strengths can be capitalized on, and we can garner these strengths to help the participant understand how they can utilize the strengths to meet their goal areas. We want to provide opportunities for the participant to be involved in their treatment, so we always want to be soliciting their feedback and incorporating their feedback into treatment. So it's not enough just to really ask them, you know, how do you think about this? What do you think would be helpful? But if you ignore it, if you ignore the kind of feedback that they give you, then that really kind of tells them that you're not really interested. So we really want you to solicit their feedback and really incorporate that into treatment planning with them. We also, think it's important that as a provider that you role model the skills that you want the participant to include in their repertoire of behaviors. So when you're working with them, mutual respect, and again, making it a collaborative process, those are all things that you want to role model for the participant. Understand that building a relationship is one of the single most important factors in the work that we do. So again, without having a relationship with a participant, it's highly unlikely that you're going to be helpful in helping them meet their outcomes. It really does start there. And you want to review or encourage review of your policies and practices to ensure that they're person-centered and convey respect and choice, and that's important. A lot of times, individuals, whether they're mandated or not, feel like they don't have choices, but they do have choices. And I always say their choices, they can choose to participate with you as a provider or choose not to participate. And so we want to make that clear, that they do have a voice, again, and choice in their treatment. And you want to understand the framework that you come from and how that might be conveyed to the individual on a subconscious level. And so we really come from a framework that believes that individuals do have the ability to change and grow despite the many adversities that they've been up against, and our actions have to portray this belief. So again, not enough to say it, we really have to treat them as such. And so when we talk about engaging participants, it really does kind of incorporate all of these elements. And, it sounds pretty basic and foundational, but we really have to work at this. And so that's very important.
Thanks, Yvette. So Ruth is going to share points of agreement.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Thank you, Yvette. As I was hearing Yvette speak, I was like, yes. It's just so important, and especially for this particular slide. Engagement is a process by which participants and service providers work together to achieve participant goals. That I know that sounds fundamentally and very basic. However, you'd be shocked at how many people really don't do that. A person's recovery, their treatment has to be their own. The focus is on the person owning their own treatment. And I love stories, so I've got a story for you. My son's former caseworker showed up at the house, and we just thought it was another regular visit. And she comes with his treatment plan all ready to sign. But it was already to sign. She created the entire thing. She not once asked us any question. They were really, everything there was really coming from her own perception of his barriers. And he was very nervous. He was very angry, but he was nervous because he thought that he had to sign it. And so he turns to me and he says, "Mommy, what do I do?" And I said, "Logan, are those your goals? Were you involved in writing them?" And he says, "No." And then I said, "Well, do you still want to sign it?" He said, "You mean I don't need to sign it?" I said, "No, if you didn't write those and create those goals with her, you do not have to sign it." And then he said, "Thank you," and he did not sign it. She looked at me like I was out of my mind, and I said, "You did not create this with him, and he has chosen not to sign it." And so that's just one example that I've experienced as a parent of an individual with severe emotional disturbance, and empowering him from a very young age to really own his treatment. When a treatment plan comes to you and it's already written, he wasn't engaged not only with the treatment plan, but obviously that shows a disconnect between himself and the staff member who wrote that treatment plan. Next slide, please. So what really should have happened in that relationship is for engagement to happen between the worker and my son in the instance that I shared with you, but that goes for any instance. You really need to begin with a strong foundation of relationship between the person receiving services and the staff member. Strong partnerships naturally lend themselves to strong engagement. So if you just focus on building a strong partnership, that relationship will naturally flow. And what do we want from that? We want positive outcomes for the people that we work with. So it all goes hand in hand. Next slide, please. Oh, I love this. So basically increasing a person's natural support. So collaboration doesn't just mean collaboration with the treatment provider, and I know you all know this, but it's really important as we're leading people towards independence and empowerment and recovery to be able to increase their natural support network, to give them other things to do in the world besides what they're currently doing. If they can try things of, other contexts, yoga, walking, employment. There are stabilities through the real world that can happen that take place completely outside of the therapeutic clinic setting. Help them find religion, meditation, journaling. All these things really help to empower people and create for them their recovery path that has nothing to do with you or I. Next slide, please.
Thank you,
I think that's Jason, yeah.
Right, so thank you so much. After that, we wanted to talk a little bit about the serious challenges to engagement and challenges to overall care. So we're going to discuss barriers. If you could all just think of one obstacle or barrier that you have encountered as you try to involve participants and just chat that in. So we're going to give everyone about a minute to just chat in some obstacles or barriers that you've experienced. Great. I'm seeing a few things coming in now. Lack of motivation to participate in services, lack of transportation, lack of child care, insurance issues as well. I'm sure that many of you are experiencing the same things. Not being interested in services, yes. Again, lack of transportation and child care. So many concrete as well as perceptual barriers. All right, thank you so much for your participation. I think that all of you have experienced a number of different barriers to really engaging participants in services. And what we found through research on barriers is that not all barriers are equal. So a lot of you discussed some of the concrete barriers as in lack of child care, insurance issues, really financial constraints and scheduling. But what we found is that perceptual barriers, so things as stigma, cultural views, prior negative experiences with services are really more important than the concrete barriers. And it's not to say that the concrete barriers don't limit engagement. It's more so that if you can address the perceptual barriers, more participants will be willing to work on the concrete barriers to really get in the door and continue with services. So when we compare the top reasons for participants terminating with services, you'll find that up to 45% of participants are satisfied with the gains they've made in therapy. Up to 34% say that there's dissatisfaction with the therapist or therapy sessions, really highlighting some of the reasons for not wanting to continue, such as the therapist making them feel as if the treatment was worse than how they had started, or not being confident in the therapist's abilities. And then 32% say that it's due to those concrete barriers, such as scheduling, childcare, and financial issues. But when we look at reasons for therapists saying that participants have terminated, approximately 29% believe that clients had successfully completed their treatment goals. 21% believe that it was due to environmental factors, and 23% believe that clients were no longer interested in therapy. Interestingly enough, only 3% of therapists actually believe that clients left due to dissatisfaction. So when it comes to engagement and when it comes to client goals and outcomes, you see that there is this kind of disconnect between what therapists are thinking and between what participants are thinking. And through these engagement practices, hopefully we'll lessen that disconnect.
I agree, Jason. This is really helpful to really think about a therapist's point of view versus the participants. And another thing that we want to consider as a barrier, a really important consideration, is the concept of trauma and really the awareness that many people that come into our agencies and our clinics have an experience of trauma in their life, and that these experiences actually really do affect their participation in treatment. So what do we mean by trauma? Trauma really refers to safety and security being severely threatened. It's the intense and overwhelming experiences that involve serious loss, threat, or harm to a person's physical or emotional well-being. These experiences may occur at one time, many times. They may occur in childhood, they may occur in adulthood. There's a lot of research being done around adverse childhood experiences, so thinking about those experiences before the age of 18 and the impact that they have on someone's life. And so we think this is a really important consideration. So we have for you this trauma infographic that all these resources, again, in the slides are going to be posted on our ctacny.com website probably by tomorrow morning. This is a great infographic. It's from SAMHSA and the National Council for Behavioral Health, How to Manage Trauma. So it's a definition of trauma. So you can see here 70% of adults in the U.S. have experienced some type of traumatic event at least once in their lives. So if we think about really experiencing a really horrible or dangerous situation and how that may impact not only how we live our life and the choices we make, but really in what it means when we ask for help. And so this is really great. It's what kind of a definition around trauma, risk factors, and then some coping strategies on the back. So this could be really helpful for you all to print out and actually hang in your office if you are interested. We also have, sorry, I'm jumping around here, the ACE survey. So if you're not currently using this in your organization, you may want to get a sense of people's experiences. I wouldn't really recommend this on the first session and the initial contact necessarily, but as you begin a working relationship, because this could be used as part of your treatment. So I wanted to get a sense, how many of you work with participants in your organization who have a history of trauma? Would you say A, all of them, B, most of them, C, some of them, D, a few of them, E, none of them, or F, I don't know? If you could just mark A, B, C, D, E, or F, and then we can review those in a minute. Okay, we should get the results here in a second. Usually we've asked these questions in a live forum, and almost everybody says 100% of my participants have experienced some kind of trauma in their life. And so again, most of you said some of them, a few of you said some of them, most of you said most of them, and then a few of you said all of them. So thank you. So as you can see, it is really important to consider the effects of trauma on someone's life as they participate in treatment. And these are principles of a trauma-informed approach. So just these principles, I think, are really important to keep in mind. This concept of safety, of trustworthiness and transparency, collaboration and mutuality. So this is something we've been talking about today in terms of engagement, but all of these are important in terms of engagement, empowerment, and voice and choice. So we really encourage you to keep these principles in mind as you think about engagement practices in your organization. And so as we found as a result of the ACE survey that was a relationship between the CDC and Kaiser Permanente with over 17,000 participants, the people really experienced some really bad things in their lives. And what we've taken from that, and this is actually a lot of work from the National Council, who we partner with as well on many different things, ways that we can think about include improving our relationships, what hurts and what helps. So things that hurt are interactions that are humiliating, harsh, impersonal, disrespectful, critical, demanding, judgmental. Ruth talked about the judgments that come with words, and to think about that. And what helps? Interactions that express kindness, patience, reassurance, calm, and acceptance and listening, and frequent use of the words like please and thank you. So this is how we can think about improving our relationships. This is our physical environment. I have someone in my life who suffered with depression and suicidal ideation for many, many years, and he told me he went to go see a new therapist, and there was bulletproof glass everywhere, and he walked in and walked out. So thinking about our physical environment and what hurts and what helps, congested areas that are noisy, can be really, really disconcerting to people who may have PTSD. I'm not saying that everybody who has a trauma experience or history has PTSD, but it's to be mindful that those congested areas that are noisy can add to what hurts, as well as uncomfortable furniture and separate bathrooms. So these are just things for you to be mindful of. And as you know, hopefully most of you have participated with us by now, that our slides are also a resource for you. So we have a bunch of resources for you, but the slides are also a resource for you to think about. These are policies and procedures if you all want to think about that. And then our attitudes and beliefs. So what may hurt is asking questions that convey the idea of like what's wrong with you, as opposed to what happened to you. So I want to talk with you about our engagement process. We've created this guideline, and we think about phone-based engagement, and we think about the initial contact happening under phone-based engagement. But I'm actually really aware of many of you who've transitioned to open access, and so that initial contact may be in person. It may be somebody walking in the door. So that's what we want to focus on today, but that there is in-person engagement, which may be that initial contact, or it may be just the first meeting. So however this looks in your organization, we just want to think about today the first contact. And in that first contact, we think it's really important to think about motivational interviewing and trauma-informed care, which I just talked about. And then in the next webinar on February 23rd, we'll talk about the first meeting in terms of the continual first meetings, if they're intake or what have you, an ongoing contact. So this is how we think about the 4 phases: initial contact, the initial interview and meeting, the ongoing services, and the terminating of services. So engagement at the first contact. So this may look different for all of you. It may be the phone call. Some of you may have an automated phone center where people call in. Some of you may have just a receptionist who answers the phone, or not just, but a receptionist that answers the phone. Some of you may have open access. So however this looks, we're thinking about the very first contact someone has with you in your organization as they seek services. So whatever that looks like. Can you chat in with me what that looks like for you? I'm really curious. We want to think about this process right now with you. We're pushing pause on this process a little bit because we know it happens quite quickly. And so many of you have caseloads of over 90, I've heard, in some of my meetings with you. And so I know that it happens quickly, and we're just pushing pause to really critically think about it. So please chat in with me. What is that initial contact like for you? Is it a phone call? Does somebody make a phone call to your organization? Is that open access? So I see live person calls, both phone inquiries and open access. Initial contact is through the phone. Centralized call center. So we want to think about this initial contact because it's so important. Whether it's a phone center, which we've heard about, maybe people are realizing that that is not the most engaging experience for someone, it's important to think about. Or maybe it's open access when people come in and they have an open appointment, they can see anybody. But we want to think about that really initial contact. And these are the objectives of that first contact that we have found to be really, really important. So be welcoming, validate the caller or validate the participant as they show up, express empathy and understanding, assess for urgency, and clarify the need. So clarify the need is really important to think about. Why is somebody coming in for help right now? And clarifying the need, not my assessment, right? So if somebody is using substances and I may be assessing that, oh, they're here to get help with their substance abuse, but in reality, maybe there's some other reason that they're coming in. Maybe they actually need housing help, or maybe they have something else going on in their life that they need help with. And the substance use is really a coping mechanism right now. So really to clarify the need with someone, and then confirming the next appointment, and really the process of therapy. So there's this idea of the preparation for someone around what therapy is, what it looks like, what our time together looks like, and if it's going to be with just someone initially and somebody else, that somebody just knows what that process looks like for them. So we have created this, is a handout. And we have actually laminates. If anybody's interested in this, we have laminated versions of these that you are welcome to. We have a learning community happening right now where people got copies of these, and we'd be happy to give you some if you want to reach out to me for them. But this is really the guideline for that initial contact. So just as what I just said, with be welcoming, validating the caller. And this is what Ruth and Edie, her colleague, and I and others here at CTEC really worked on creating for you. And so I also wanted to show you back to here, motivational interviewing, and how important it is to consider motivational interviewing in that immediate contact. So this is a great image I found. It's from the MINT training, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. And I think it's really helpful to look at motivational interviewing and how it really helps in terms of behavior change. So it starts with the spirit, so autonomy. So really with the knowledge and the appreciation for self-determination in our participants and people we work with, and that they are in charge of themselves and the decisions they make. And collaboration, so you've heard that a lot today and how important that is. And evocation, so we're evoking that sense of change with someone, not in someone, but with someone. And then the principles, rolling with resistance, expressing empathy, developing discrepancy, supporting that self-efficacy, and how the MINT people refer to these micro skills as open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, summaries. And then we have change talk, so talk about desires, ability, reason, need, and then commitment. So think about commitment, activation, and taking steps, and then in the end is behavior change. So I think this is really helpful for us to think about motivation and interviewing and utilizing that from the very first contact. So after that first contact, you're going to confirm the next appointment and conclude the call. Thank someone for coming in or for calling. Make sure they have the information and the place and the date and the time of the next appointment and how to get there. Sometimes, you know, we do hear that location of our organizations, our clinics, or the lack of transportation is a real barrier. And sometimes just having a conversation. When I was working in a clinic, I would sit down with someone and ask them, you know, how do you get here? How can we make that a little easier? Let's look at the subway together. So really kind of attending to any of these barriers that may get in the way of participation. Make sure that somebody knows what to bring to the appointment, so the insurance card, identification, list of medications, explaining the timeline of the first appointment, orienting people to services. What does it look like? When you come here, this is what we're going to do. Or if you're here already because you're part of open access, this is what we're going to do the next time you come in. How does that sound? And following up with the caller by phone or email with an appointment reminder. So some people do follow, phone calls in between to remind people. Some people do text. Some people have automated reminders. So whatever it is, just to let them know that this is what's going to happen. You're going to get a phone call from our receptionist, or you're going to get a phone call from an automated service. Just to let them know what to expect is really important. So we're going to do a little role play with you. We have Ruth, who is a clinician, and she is with us. And we have Jason, who is a participant, and he's with us. And so Jason is a 28-year-old male, and he is presenting with substance abuse issues and depression. He's currently unemployed and looking for work. He has a 4-year-old son who he shares custody with. He called the clinic because he wanted an appointment. However, he has yet to show. He's actually had 2 appointments, and he hasn't showed for either. He's called at the last minute on both occasions to reschedule. He lives about 20 miles away, and he usually uses his cousin's car to get there whenever he can. The role play right now is going to be Ruth. She's going to call Jason to remind him of his next appointment that's happening in a few days. and we're going to ask you some questions. Okay, take it away, guys.
Who's going to do the phone ring?
Ring, 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 ring.
Thank you.
Hello?
Hi, can I speak to Jason, please?
This is he.
Hi, Jason. It's Ruth Wagner. I know you and I haven't officially met, but we've spoken on the phone. Do you remember? I'm from ABC Clinic.
Right. Yes, I do remember.
Yeah, how you doing? It's so good to talk to you.
I'm all right. It's good to talk to you too. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, well, the reason I'm reaching out to you today is because we have an appointment scheduled for tomorrow, and I wanted to make sure that you remembered it and to see if there's any way that I can provide you with some assistance so that you can make your first appointment.
Okay, tomorrow. I meant to call you. I don't think I'm going to be able to make it tomorrow.
Okay. Can you share with me what's going on?
It's just, I live, 15 to 20 miles away. It's just, I need to get transportation, and I can't get, I think the appointment's at 4. I can't get a babysitter in time for my son. He needs someone.
That's right. You have a 4-year-old, of course. Well, first things first, we want you to be able to fit treatment into your life, but you need to know that we do not expect treatment to be your life. So I want to have a conversation with you, and you've got real situations that will make your coming to our session tomorrow not possible, and that's okay. We've got other time frames where you can make it, and I know you said you've got your 4-year-old that you share custody with, and that you also sometimes can use your cousin's vehicle. Do you think maybe we can talk about all of those things and decide when it's possible for you to have those things that you need in order to come in?
I mean, yeah. His mother takes him on certain days, so that would be easier if I didn't have to deal with that.
Right, because, the schedule doesn't always have to fit into what I do. I can change my schedule to fit you. So now you already know that, I want you to come when you can make it. So we'll make sure that you don't have, you're not with your 4-year-old son on the days that you come, if that's doable. And if it's not doable, we could talk about something else. And what about your cousin's vehicle?
Right, so he works afternoons to night, so I really only have mornings to really set that up.
Oh,
and I can't walk there, so.
Right. You can't walk to your cousin's car, you mean, or you can't walk to the clinic?
No, to the clinic. It's just too far.
Oh, yeah, it's like 20 miles. No, of course not. So why don't we try a couple of things? I really want you to come and make it to our next session. So we'll pick a date and a time where you don't have your son and a morning time when you can use your cousin's vehicle.
That sounds
Does that
great.
sound okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, and I want you to know you figured this out for yourself. We can call each other tomorrow and see what day is best for you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for calling.
Well, you're welcome. I know that there are a lot of barriers in our lives that prevent us from doing some things, but I also know that sometimes you feel under the weather, and so that's what we're here for.
All right, thank you.
We're here to help you, but not to interrupt your life.
Mm.
So how about we reschedule for tomorrow at this time, and I will give you a phone call.
All right, that sounds good.
All right, great. Thank you, Jason, and you take care, and I'll speak to you tomorrow.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ruth and Jason. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. So we want to ask you guys who are with us on the line, what do you think? So what would you tell Jason when he explains the situation? What did you think about the role play? Chat in with us, any kind of feedback you have. What would you tell Jason when he explains the situation? How can you work with Jason to ensure he gets the help he needs and wants? And was there anything missing? It's please chat in with us so we can get your feedback. If not, we can move on. I think Ruth did a really good job of meeting Jason where he was. He did sound a little hesitant and maybe a little nervous. I think that's something to keep in mind to really understand that it is scary when you're asking for help and you're going to make this first appointment. Someone said the role play was good, but he did not really sound very interested. So what would you do if you were calling someone and they didn't sound interested? Access to public transportation, somebody asked, is that a possibility? Can we check to see if there's a similar clinic closer by to him? Ruth, did you consider saying that, asking him about that?
You know, I did. It was part of some things that, depending on which way the conversation would go, there are obviously other variables in which I could help him get to. And I thought about Metro Cards and another clinic closer. In this case, he seemed sort of, well, maybe there was an opportunity when he wasn't taking care of his 4-year-old and that there was that time slot in the morning where he could use his cousin's vehicle. So within that time frame, sort of figured let him make those inquiries, and then tomorrow morning, because nothing is a rush here, we'd rather work this out as opposed to him just missing an appointment. We would connect tomorrow to see if that's a possibility. And if it wasn't, and then maybe those other conversations would need to take place.
Yeah, I really like the way you did that. So you assessed where he was, what he may need, what's getting in the way, and then you didn't feel the need to kind of solve it right away. You said, let's check in again tomorrow. So when tomorrow comes, if you're Ruth, what would you say to Jason? How would you follow up? So someone said, is he still interested in services?
Right. That's one of the things that I always worry about when you say, well, maybe there's another clinic closer. I don't want him to feel rejected by me. I still want to work with him. And so I need to start from there.
Yep, I agree. Any other feedback from anyone? I thought you guys did a great job. Thanks so much for sharing your talents with us.
Thank you.
So we're just wondering what you could do in your clinic or your agency right away to think about that initial contact. Is there anything in particular that you would want to change? Would it be that person who's calling the call center? Would it be validating the caller? Would it be really thinking about how you express empathy and understanding? Would it be clarifying the need? So any of these areas that you would want to change, and we want you to think about it and think about what you would do differently right away. And we have some things for you. This is a self-assessment around engagement. So this is something that you could all do individually as clinicians, or you could do as a group. So to encourage engagement of participants, I provide clear overview of the first meeting. So looking at what you do well, or you do this but need some improvement, or I don't do this and needs much improvement. So you could self-assess as an organization, and then you could choose one area that you want to work on. This is also something that you could do together. And then Ruth has created this brochure for you. Do you want to talk just a minute about this, Ruth?
Yes, I'd love to. This brochure was created using the guidelines for the first meeting and guideline for ongoing contact that was created a couple of years ago by CTAC along with NIAPers. And it's actually the actual guidelines you've already seen, and they're wonderful. But what we wanted to create was really something in the most intimate of moments when you're just beginning to develop that very tenuous relationship with the person that you hope to be working with. And it's guiding them through who you are, what you're going to be doing, what's your role, what's their role, and will therapy ever end? That's like the biggest question, right? I mean, how long am I going to be doing this for? Things like that. And so this really, in a very gentle way and a very trauma-informed way, goes through all those guidelines in a sort of narrative discussion. So this is really an opportunity for the clinician to be, outside of behind that desk, just sitting knee to knee with someone, reviewing the curriculum, this brochure together, and going through what their work together will look like. And by just having that conversation and doing this together, that is the beginning of creating an engaging relationship with each other.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. So again, all these things will be up on our website. Remember that collaboration is really what it's about most of all, that you collaborate with participants. It's all about partnerships. These are tools that are going to be posted as well. We have motivational interviewing. I didn't show you this. This is a huge document, really, really helpful, especially this first page. I love a change plan worksheet that you could use with participants as well. The ACE survey and the brochure. We have run out of time. These are our next steps. So think about that. One change that you may want to make as an organization around this initial contact and critically thinking about it together. And then if you could bring that back on February 23rd and talk to us, and then we're going to talk about the rest of engagement in terms of the first few meetings and then ongoing engagement, okay? I hope that you all have a wonderful day. We also will have consultation calls on March. I forgot to mention that, so I wanted you to get this in your calendar. So if you want any kind of assistance with the engagement practices, March 17th for CTAC audience, March 16th for our learning community, and then again April 6th for our learning community and April 7th. And then in May, we will have a final webinar to talk about lessons learned. Thanks again for joining us. If you have any questions or comments, you can feel free to email me, kara.dean@nyu.edu. We hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you on February 23rd. Take good care now. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.